What it do, what it do. It's your boy Andre Spruell, and you are tuning in to the Middle of the Fence podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, whether you're listening, watching, or both. As I like to say, time is the most valuable thing on this earth because we can spend it but can't make it back. So as always, thank you for your time. And in today's episode, it's titled The Power of Education in Breaking Cycles. So education is often called the great equalizer, but depending on which side of the fence you're on, it can either be a ladder out or another broken promise. So let's start with the side of the fence where the struggle feels the heaviest, the tough terrain. Because when we talk about education, the gap between potential and opportunity becomes powerfully clear here. And before I get into the tough terrain portion, if you haven't checked out the previous episodes or aren't that familiar with my story, education is the one thing that really saved my life and enabled me to start this podcast in the first place and be able to talk about the topics discussed and have the guests that I've met come on as a result. And future guests as well. So let's get back on topic with this. So on the tough terrain, the most obvious issue with education is underfunded schools. The schools in urban areas receive significantly less funding than their suburban counterparts. And EdBuild, a research organization that promotes equity in public schools, released the results of their analysis of a 2016 public school funding on the national and state levels. And they found that despite decades of desegregation efforts, white school districts received $23 billion more in funding in 2016 than school districts that mostly served students of color. And this obviously means that with the lack of funding, it's lack of resources to be able to learn, for a student to be able to learn at their highest capacity possible. And then also too, it means that the classrooms are run down. Maybe summer days the AC doesn't work, and on cold days the heat isn't working like how it's supposed to. So it produces an environment that's not conducive for students to be able to learn and fulfill their fullest potential. And when I get into the Affluent Acres side, you'll see why this disparity is such a big issue. And the underlying issue that I feel like is understood but doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that this creates a cycle of poverty, because the poor schools often reinforce that cycle of poverty by having lower graduation rates, limited career options, and higher risk of incarceration. And a 2020 study shows that children in the poorest 20% of neighborhoods are 5 times more likely to drop out of high school. And that's from Brookings in 2020. And again, it's just a matter of the environment and the fact that it stems from it being underfunded. And when you have lack of resources, you have an environment that's not conducive to the students performing at their highest potential, then it leads to them not making much out of their lives more often than not. And I don't come off as like a jerk by saying that. It's just the statistics, and it's the sad reality of it. And then what also stems from that is the fact that there's the parental struggles, because parents obviously understand the value of education, but because of the circumstances of the systemic issues like work schedule and resources and stress, it limits how much they can supplement to help out their children going to schools in urban areas. And this makes me think of my situation personally, because again, I grew up in an urban area and went and got a private school education from kindergarten through high school in a very suburban, well-off area. But although, my my mom was the driving factor behind it with her and her 4 kids. It was a village that helped out. And it was my grandma and grandpa, my aunt and uncle as well. And we all used to live together, and my cousin as well. Typical Spanish household. Everybody all in the same fucking house. But looking back, if it was just my mom and her 4 kids sending us to private school, would she have found a way to get us back and forth from school and practices and school events and social outings? I'm sure of it, but it can't be denied that it took a village in order to make that sacrifice for us to get that education. It wasn't just the financial sacrifice, it was everyone chipping in. Like my grandfather into his 60s and 70s was like picking us up from from school, and then my aunt helping out by driving in the morning and picking us up after school, and and my uncle helping out with that as well, because my mom was working long hours to help support us. So if it wasn't for that, that village type of structure, then the possibility of getting that education, likely would have fallen through, and life could have looked completely different as a result. And if we cross over to the other side of the fence, Affluent Acres paints a very different picture. The resources, the access, even the expectations, it all looks and feels worlds apart. So just like how the underfunding in the tough terrain was the big issue, on the Affluent Acres, they have access to quality schools, and that's the primary given factor, right? So it means smaller classes, advanced placement classes, extracurriculars, and all that creates pipelines to top colleges. And this makes me think of a particular story that my brother told me, to the point where, because it's so expected that in a suburban upbringing that you have everything possible, and that college isn't as much of a privilege, because, well, let me take that back. So because of the factors that I described on the tough terrain side, going to college was a privilege and the pinnacle to change the course of your life and be able to change the roots and redirect the course of your family tree. So if you had that tough terrain upbringing, college is the primary way to, that's what was seen as the primary way to change your life and your family's life. But on the Affluent Acre side, it's just a given, to the point where sometimes you're so well off financially that you don't even need access to all that stuff. Because when my brother was a senior in high school, he asked one of his friends, "Oh, did you use FAFSA to get into the to try to get into some of these schools?" And for those that don't know, FAFSA is free application for student aid. So most students sent their application in for it to try to get scholarships and grants. So when my brother asked his friend, she literally said, "What's that?" So it's just a clear illustration that, because of the access, even to the point where the financial access can be so high that you don't even need student aid, because you already know college is a given, and whatever happens after that, you're going to be good. And the other aspect of education on the Affluent Acres side is the cycle of privilege. So it ensures kids in Affluent Acres not only attend better schools, but also have tutoring, SAT prep, and networking. And this is from Lewis McCoy's 2023 study published in the RSF Journal, which illustrates public schools in the U.S. are largely funded through local property taxes. In wealthy suburbs, higher home values mean more money flows into schools. Stronger schools then boost property values even further, attracting more affluent families who can afford those homes. And this creates a loop where wealth yields better schools, which yields higher home prices, which yields wealthier residents and repeats. So that cycle, again, is wealth, which yields better schools, turns into higher home prices, which leads to wealthier residents, and the cycle repeats. So that's the cycle that education is at the foundation of on the Affluent Acres side. And it's obviously night and day difference with how that same cycle of education shows up on the tough terrain side. And despite that, there's disguised struggles that kids go through on the Affluent Acres side. And I wanted to highlight this because it's so, when you come from a tough terrain background or a lower middle class background, it's so easy to just be like, oh man, they have it so fucking easy. They have access to this and that. But it doesn't diminish the fact that those kids also have their own struggles. And, you know, with this platform that I have, I want to acknowledge that. And obviously, you know, if we were all born, if we all got to, you know, choose who our parents were, most of us would choose families that are millionaires and billionaires probably, you know, but we don't get to choose who our parents are and the cars that life deals us with. And some of the struggles on the Affluent Acre side, this comes from two different studies. So this is from from Luther and Becker's 2002 study, as well as Flett and Hewitt's 2013 study, which states affluent students may appear to quote unquote have it all, but face pressures of perfectionism, higher rates of substance abuse use, and hidden mental health struggles. And again, this is just a reminder that, you know, we all go through our own struggles. And just because someone has more material factors and things and access to more to set up to be more successful in life, it doesn't mean that they don't struggle. You know, everyone goes through their struggle, whether you grew up in Affluent Acres or tough terrain side, we all go through our own shit. And that's something that can unite us regardless. And we all should be able to see eye to eye on that, right? And so we've seen the two extremes, but here's where my own story comes in. Living between these worlds gave me a front row seat to both realities. And it raises the question, how do we build bridges that break cycles instead of reinforcing them? So the advantages are unfair, but that's life. You got to make the most with what you got, right? And just like I mentioned, despite the educational disparity, we all go through our own struggles regardless. And one way that I would like to frame this is that you see a lot of stories where someone that grew up in an urban area, okay, they, despite the odds not being in their favor, they find a way to persevere through not having access to resources and being in an environment that's not conducive to their best way of learning, and still find a way to make it through college, graduate, and change the course of their family tree forever. And then you have the flip side of that, where you have kids that grew up on the Affluent Acre side that have access to everything possible to succeed in life and don't do shit with their lives. So that's just another way to look at it. And the obvious ways to bridge the gap so education is equal on both sides of the fence is the breaking of the cycles requires intentional investment, like mentorship programs, scholarships, reallocation of school funding, and things like that. So it's like we know what needs to be done and what we want to do, but it's just a matter of actually making it happen so it can be a reality. So the same advantages that kids on the Affluent Acre side have the kids on the tough terrain side can have more of a fighter's chance to make something of their lives and not be disadvantaged by their environment and the cycles that the education creates. And the question that I pose to the audience is, how did your educational environment shape your path? And are you using it to break cycles or repeat them? Again, how did your educational environment shape your path? And are you using it to break cycles or repeat them? And thank you guys for tuning in to this episode. And if you like this episode, please be sure to continue showing us love on the podcast streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you already know, give us a 5-star rating because this is your new favorite podcast. Comment and follow so you can continue supporting the Middle of the Fence family. And you can catch us on YouTube as well, at Andre Spruell on YouTube, and you'll find the playlist for the full-length episodes as well as clips from previous episodes. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe, comment, like, and hit the notification bell so you can be the first to be notified when the latest episode drops. And as I take you guys out, as always, thank you for the love and support. And no matter what side of the fence you grew up on, we're all more alike than we think. My name is Andre Spruell. Catch you guys next time.